Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video, we're getting very close to spooky season, which means I get to make another foam pumpkin build. And if you're new to my channel, be sure to check out some of my previous pumpkins for ideas that you could utilize around your house this Halloween season. Now, with this year, we're going with a Scarecrow themed pumpkin, and it's a little more simplified than some of the ones I've done in the past, because needless to say, there's a lot going on here, but I want to make sure that I have projects available for everyone. Now, this is a two-part build series. So we have the Scarecrow pumpkin itself, but we also have a completely custom burlap wrap hat. The base for this is made out of my HD foam, which you can find over at Blick Art Materials. And if you'd like to make your own hat, I have free PDF files available over on my website that you could download to build right along with me. And the thing I like about this project is, yes, you can utilize the hat for our Scarecrow project, but you could also make this hat and use it for costumes or for cosplay. So I want to show you what it takes to put our Scarecrow theme together for this year. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start this build by making the Scarecrow's hat. The brim of this will be made up of part A, which will be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. An interior circle is also sketched onto the foam. This is either going to fit your head or the pumpkin. This inside circle will have multiple notches taken out of the interior. This will help the brim conform to the correct shape for a nice snug fit. The main section of the hat will be made up of part B, which is also going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. And you could always change the height of this shape for a unique look. After the foam has been rolled, the ends can be glued together to create a cylinder. A strip of 2mm foam is going to be glued on the inside to help strengthen this seam. Now all the darts that have been cut out earlier can be glued to the inside of part B. This is going to do two things. It's going to help attach the top, but also shape the brim. With parts A and B attached, we can now move on to part C, which is going to make up the top of the hat. This circle is also going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. Once I make sure that the size was correct, I could then apply adhesive along the perimeter. And at this point you can see we have a nicely shaped top hat. But because this is for a Scarecrow, I'd like for mine to have a little more character. So to help adjust the shape, I'm going to draw out some lines and cut some vertical slits along the sides. After being cut with a hobby knife, these are going to be glued on top of each other. This is going to allow me to control how much of the middle of the hat collapses in on itself. And this trick really only works because we're going to be covering the entire thing with burlap. Using my rotary tool, I'm going to knock down the excess foam on these cuts to give it a more organic shape. After a light heat treatment, I could then start to manipulate the foam to give it a little more character. I decided that I wanted the top of the hat to be a little more pronounced. So I'm going to apply some super glue along the inside of the hat and then press the foam together until I get the shape that I want. Now that is a worn and dilapidated hat. At this point the brim was a little too clean, so I'm going to remove some of the foam to match the look of the rest of the hat. With my shapes pretty much figured out, it's now time to prime and seal the foam using some Plasti Dip. I also applied a light dusting of Krylon Red Oxide Primer. And that's because the burlap is somewhat porous and you might be able to see through. Going back to my hat patterns, I can now take part C and trace and cut that out of the burlap. This material is going to be tacked into place using some hot glue. I used a stronger resin-based hot glue for the majority of the middle. Part B was also traced onto the burlap, but I left a ½ inch overhang on the top. This will be important for how it attaches to the hat. Hot glue is once again going to be used to attach the burlap to the sides of the hat, using the low temp along the perimeter and the resin based in the middle. Here you can see that ½ inch overhang on the top. This additional material is going to be hot glued down, giving it more of an assembled look. For this, I'm using the low temp hot glue so I can use my fingers to press it into place. Part A, or the template for the brim, can now be traced onto the burlap. I make sure to leave additional material along the outside edge. This is going to be trimmed away later on. Just like the rest of the burlap, this can be hot glued down to the 4mm foam. And the whole reason I use the 4mm foam is it's a perfect thickness for this type of an application. And here you can see how having all those different cuts in the foam don't matter now. The burlap does a great job hiding all those imperfections and just giving us a well-weathered surface. The lower brim can now be traced and cut out of the burlap just like the upper section. With all the material applied, I can now add hot glue along the exterior of the brim to help close it up. Once pressed together and trimmed away, this is going to help the brim get a more seamless look. Now at this point, be careful not to remove too much material to get it back to the foam. A lighter is used to help burn away any excess burlap fibers. Now structurally the hat is sound, but aesthetically I'd like to add some additional string to the hat. This jute string can be tinted in some dark acrylic water using some Liquitex Mars Black. Some cross-stitching is done along the edges where the front and the back of the burlap meet. Additional thread is also sewn through the top to make it look like the entire thing is assembled this way. And here you can see how it just gives it a little bit more of a rustic look and feel. To cover up the seam at the base of the hat, I'm going to be using this mesh cloth. It's kind of similar to a cheesecloth. After I figure out the length that I need, just like the string, I'm going to dip it into the acrylic water. This is going to darken the cloth up and make it look like it fits more with the hat. Hot glue is once again going to be used to affix one end of the cloth to the back of the hat. Adhesive is then used every so often around the hat as I pull the material tight. When I get to the back, the material can be looped underneath and then adhered into place. I'd like the hat to have a little bit of a color shift, so I'm going to be using some transparent Createx purple. This is a paint that's thinned down a little bit and then sprayed through my Iwata airbrush. At this point I'm just picking out the recesses in the hat, and this is going to help give it a little more volume. The pigment is also applied around the perimeter. And here you can see a little bit goes a long way to help change the overall look of the hat. I'd also picked up a couple of colored feathers while I was at the craft store. These are going to be twisted together and inserted on the side. These just help give a different variation in texture to the overall piece, but of course you could add whatever you'd like to yours. Now it's time to work on the pumpkin's face, and I first draw a line to see how much room I'm going to work with. From here I can sketch out the placement of the eyes, nose, and mouth. A hot tool with a scalpel blade is going to be used to slice into the pumpkin. The temperature is set as high as it'll go, and I move at a slow, steady pace to get a nice clean cut. If you do it right, once the lines are connected, the pieces should just pop right out. The mouth is a little bit trickier. I start in the upper corner of each tooth first, and then I can go back and slice away the bottom. For these straight cuts, you want to try to minimize turning the blade as much as possible. I use a kneaded eraser to remove any additional pencil lines from the surface. You know I love making my monster eyes, so once again I'm going to be using some clear Christmas bulbs. To eventually attach these, I'm going to need to cut a hole in the back of my pumpkin. This doesn't need to be very large, and most of it's going to be covered up by the hat when we're finished. The base of the eyeball is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. I make sure that the circles fit flush before applying some foam clay to the surface. Now, if you've never used it before, foam clay is adhered and smoothed out using water. I can also use silicone tip tools to help sculpt into the surface. A leather punch is going to be used to remove the hole for the pupil. With this removed, additional strands of foam clay can be used to build up along the eye. It's all about getting some depth and detail to the sculpture that will really be amplified once paint is applied. While the eyes dry, some black spray paint is used to darken the interior of the pumpkin. Some additional foam clay is applied to the surface of the pumpkin to simulate some imperfections. The eyes have dried for about 24 hours, and now I'm going to use a stone bit on my rotary tool to help clean them up. A wire brush is also going to be used to give some additional textures to the surface. The eyes can now be glued down to some sheets of 4mm foam. This is going to give additional surface area that's going to be glued to the interior of the pumpkin. But before they can be glued into place, they need to be sealed and sprayed with some Plastidip and Valspar Orange. This does a great job acting as a base for the foam clay, but you can see how the light picks up on all the individual textures. This is going to be amplified by using some hand painting, and we're going to start off with some Liquitex Heavy Body Cadmium Orange. Using no water, this pigment is going to be dry brushed over the surface. Some cadmium yellow is mixed in and applied just around the iris, making it a focal point. Mars Black is going to be applied to the pupil and the outside of the eye. And as a final touch, some Vallejo gloss is applied to the surface. Before I glue the eyes in, I want to distress the pumpkin's face first. I do a wash of Mars Black over the entire surface using a 1-inch mop brush. And I dab up a lot of the excess paints using a damp paper towel. This just gives the pumpkin a nice dirty, grungy look. This really helps sell the fact that my pumpkin isn't brand new. I like for my cuts not to be quite so clean, so I go in with a stone bit on my rotary tool and I round over some of the cuts. This just helps give it a little bit of contrast that I really like. The Christmas bulbs can now be super glued into place, encapsulating the eye. And here's where the additional material around the eye helps out. I can super glue the corners of the 4mm foam onto the inside of the pumpkin. This will make sure that the eyes get positioned just right and that they won't move. I imagine at one point a farmer would have painted the pumpkin's face white, just as a contrast to help it stand out. But time and weather has caused the paint to wear and chip away, exposing some of the original pumpkin's color from underneath. I can also help this process by scrubbing away some of the paint using a damp paper towel. I picked up some long strands of straw from the floral section at our local craft store. Now the length was a little too long, so I cut it down and I taped sections together. I'm going to root these into the pumpkin like you would with doll hair. So after I had my sections completed, I can then drill holes all along the stem. Hot glue could then be added and straw was inserted to each one of these holes. The back of the pumpkin that I removed earlier could now be glued into place. And using more hot glue, the straw hair could be glued flat to the pumpkin. I just need to add my burlap hat and our Scarecrow creation for this year is complete.
So you all can see what it takes to put together a Scarecrow themed pumpkin for Halloween 2024. And again, check out some of my other pumpkins that are on my channel. I've got this guy, I've got a mimic pumpkin that I did a couple years ago. Both are very popular, and hopefully all of these will give you ideas for pumpkins that you could make around your house. Now, if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKSProps on Twitter and Instagram because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD Foam.